Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So this is going to be another Scientology from a Scientologist perspective video. So let's get this trigger warning out of the way. Trigger warning. This is going to be my thoughts and opinions on a religion. If you find this triggering in any way, go ahead and click off this video. Also, if you do not like my delivery on this religion, go ahead, click off this video. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's get into this video. Today I'm going to be covering another article by Tony Ortega at the Underground Bunker. This is called Scientology, Deception, and Financial Fraud Spelled Out in Incredible Legal Document. He posted this on April the 12th, 2019. And I've got it pulled up right here on my phone. So let's get into that. I've got my notes written out. Let's go on. So in this article, he's going to be talking about an attorney named Graham Barry. And Graham Barry has like a 20-year plus reputation of fighting Scientology. So he's one of those guys that's been in the trenches against Scientology for a while now. But he has now gotten pretty good reputation of winning civil suits against Scientology where it comes to like monetary cases in which Scientology has defrauded these people out of some cases a large amount of money. So let's talk about a couple of these cases. The first one is going to be this Ephraim Lagier. I'm not quite sure how to say his last name. This man became homeless after Scientology had talked him into exorbitant charges with high interest rates for courses in auditing he could never make use of. Another case that he took on was for an 82-year-old woman. Now this case made me very mad. This 82-year-old woman that they flew from the Midwest out to LA, and then they pressured this woman and pressured her until she finally consented for tens of thousands of dollars of charges for Scientology. Okay, one that is just ridiculous. Two, in my eyes, that is a form of kidnapping and extortion that is just horrible. Graham Barry took on both of these cases. He won both of these cases. He made them whole in both of these cases. So kudos to Graham Barry. He is also currently handling several cases that are similar to these, to the point where Ortega was talking to Barry. He knew that he had just successfully finished a case. He was kind of asking Barry about the case, just trying to get, a nice little interview going, when Graham Barry dropped a bomb on Ortega. And that was that the Scientology attorney, Kendrick Moxon, did not this is a huge oversight in Moxon's abilities. Moxon did not make them sign a settlement agreement or a non-disclosure agreement, so every bit of the documentation in these cases is open and can be discussed. So we have the demand letters, and Graham Barry turned over one of them, and so I'm going to be reading that letter here in a minute. Also, Graham stated that he was going to be handling this one case. He accepted the case. As soon as the guy retained him for his services, the Church of Scientology repaid all of his money to his credit cards before he could even begin working on the case. So Barry has put the fear of some deity into Scientology. So I'm going to pull up the letter and I'm going to read it to you guys. This is going to be in the case of Sean Henderson. So this is the letter that Barry drafted and sent to Moxon. This is the demand letter in the case for Sean Henderson. Mr. Sean Henderson was once employed by the church for a short period of time, but he left approximately 26 years ago without completing a proper routing out. Having blown, he was ineligible for further coursework and auditing without completing required rehabilitation such as his A to E. After blowing from the church in approximately 1992, Mr. Henderson lived with a girlfriend for 13 years, and after their breakup, he continued living in the house which they had bought together. Although his name was not on the title, in 2016 he moved out. The house was sold. He received nothing for the sale. Thereafter, Mr. Henderson moved to the Big Island of Hawaii, where he worked clearing land and planting trees. Owning his own piece of land there, he accumulated some savings of approximately $14,000, to which he was able to add $10,000 inheritance from his grandmother's estate. He found a property listed at $27,000. Mr. Henderson negotiated a sale price of $24,000 and opened an escrow with a down payment of $500. Escrow was due to close November 24th, 2019. However, he was continuing to suffer from bouts of depression. At the very beginning of October 2018, Mr. Henderson was surprised to learn that Cassie had left a note on the door of his brother's house in Chino, California. Since he did not recall knowing a California Cassie, he called the telephone number and was connected with Cassie at the Church of Scientology Los Angeles org. He said he was not interested in Scientology, but both Cassie and later Sherry persisted. He received repeated telephone calls and voicemails from the LA org. He had been offline for 26 years. During that time, he had called the church a few times to request it be removed his name from its data and mailing list because he did not want to continue receiving mail from the church and related entities. Mr. Henderson was an illegal PC, and the church should have known it. Certainly, he was not interested in any further participation in the church. When the church contacted Mr. Henderson in October 2018, he was not abusing alcohol or smoking cannabis. He was depressed, impressionable, and pliable. The church used its hard sell on Mr. Henderson. He was told that it was now the golden age of Tech 2, and that he could be clear in 3 months. Mr. Henderson informed the caller that he could not afford it. He said he'd earned only a minimum of $500 per month. He was on food stamps and saving for his purchase of some land, which was in escrow. Undeterred, the church representative offered Mr. Henderson a round-trip air ticket to Los Angeles at church expense, and to accommodate him there at the church expense, and to feed him there at church expense, so that he could go clear. Mr. Henderson would later wonder how and why he finally agreed to go. Maybe he was just plain curious. Anyway, Mr. Henderson was flown from Hawaii to Los Angeles on October 9th, 2018. The church has arranged for an Uber car to drive him from the LA org to L. Ron Hubbard Way. When he entered the org, there were about 20 people standing around. A shout went up. Sean Henderson's back. We're happy to have him here. They told him how they were helping people in the world, and they wanted him to be a part of it. Mr. Henderson be in Los Angeles for nearly 3 weeks. The first week, the church paid for his accommodations at the Scientology Crest Hotel near the Scientology Celebrity Center in East Hollywood. At the end of the first week, the Crest Hotel informed Mr. Henderson that he would have to vacate because there was no money on account. He immediately spoke with his handlers in the LA org, who informed him that he now had to pay for everything. When Mr. Henderson unsuccessfully objected to Sherry, she said that Cassie should have been R-factored when he agreed to stay. Apparently meaning that when Mr. Henderson agreed to stay longer in Los Angeles, he should have been informed or reality factored that he had to take over the payment of his accommodation and food expenses. Later, also, contrary to the church's representations, Mr. Henderson had to pay for his return ticket to Hawaii. Mr. Henderson expected that he would go on course to be clear as soon as he arrived in Los Angeles. He had not been informed that because of his use of alcohol and cannabis use back in Hawaii, he was not sessionable, and there would be a dry-out period before he could go on course. So his first week with the LA org was spent receiving body and nerve assistance to put his body back in touch with itself and to wake the nerves up, and going for long walks, locationals. Later, Mr. Henderson would learn that the church was charging him approximately $19,000 for these expensive assistances, something he had not been told at the time, and that he had not agreed to. Okay, so far, I'm going to stop right there. There's still some more to the letter. I'm going to stop right there. 1, they searched out this man that had not been involved in the church for 26 years. Like, he blew, like, big middle finger, gone. They searched him out, found his brother, left a note for him. He calls them and tells them, when he finds out who it is, dude, I'm not interested. They keep hard selling this man who's already depressed. Oh, we'll pay for you, no problem. We'll send you a ticket out at our expense. We'll pay for you to stay here at our expense. We'll feed you at our expense, no problem. We want to get you back here. We want to get you back in service. We want to help you. We're clearing the planet. We're doing all these great things. Let us get you back here and get you back into service and get you going clear. They finally talk him into it. Fly him back. Big hoopla, he's here. And then at the end of the first week, they're like, oh, you have to start paying for your way now. You should have been reality checked when you decided to stay. No, y'all told him if he came back, y'all were paying for him. And then they sneak in, because he'd been drinking and smoking weed, oh, now you have to do these assistances, and they're going to cost $19,000 for you to go on long walks. I could have done that for free back in Hawaii with a joint hanging out of my mouth. I mean, Mr. Henderson dealt with a few people at the LA org. Nicole was the senior director of processing, and Ben was a director of processing. Lindsay Smith was the registrar, and Cassie appeared to be a registrar in training. Sherry appeared to be a registrar. Cassie had arranged for his air ticket and accommodation. She obtained his signature on a clear package. It was a blank piece of paper on which she wrote, I, Sean Henderson, agree to pay $80,000 for the clear package. Of course, it was totally out policy for the church to sell Mr. Henderson any Scientology services when he had not done his amends, such as his A to E. He was an illegal PC, having failed to complete routing out 26 years earlier. After arriving at the LA org, Mr. Henderson was required to provide Registrar Lindsay with his social security information, date of birth, address, his bank account information, his RCU credit card. The church already had much of Mr. Henderson's personal data from his employment on staff nearly 30 years ago. Mr. Henderson had been told that the clear package normally cost parishioners $240,000 to purchase, but he was being offered the clear package at a special price of $80,000. Mr. Henderson told the registrar again that there was no way he could afford that. He only earned about $500 per month, and he was on a government food stamp program. Furthermore, he was in the binding escrow contract for the purchase of the land in the Big Island of Hawaii. Sherry told him that clear is for many lifetimes, but his land was only for this lifetime, and he would still be able to buy that land after going clear if he still wanted that. Lindsay, Cassie, and Sherry said they would figure out a way to make the money side of it happen. They would open a line of credit and pay for it. Later, they said they would open 0% interest credit cards for him and find a place he could afford to stay and a job. They never did find him a job. He was told the credit card limits would be enough to pay the $80,000 clear package. However, Mr. Henderson did not know that sort of job he could get that would pay the kind of money necessary to pay off the credit lines. Sherry said she would put together a proper spreadsheet with all the information regarding each credit card, due dates, payment accounts, etc. She never did. Moreover, the church overwhelmed Mr. Henderson with arguments such as, "We can make this work. Sometimes you need to step up and play a bigger game." Eventually, Mr. Henderson told them, "Just don't mess with the RCU credit card." Mr. Henderson also told the handlers that they were not to touch the money in his RCU checking account. As we shall see, the church did so anyway. Okay, so stepping away from that for a second, you fly this man back to Los Angeles after you say you're going to pay for his accommodations. You stop, you tell him he's got to start doing it, you tell him he has to start paying his own way. Then you start pressuring him. You say, well, normally it costs $240,000, but we're giving you a deal. It's going to be only $80,000 after he's told you several times, I only make $500 a month. I'm on food stamps. I don't have this money. Oh, we're going to open you lines of credit. We're going to help you get a job. You never help him get a job, but you open him lines of credit. And then you say, well, I'm going to put you together a spreadsheet telling you which lines of credit are due at what time and how much. And you never even do that. So you're just basically screwing with him anyway. And then he's telling you, don't mess with this credit card and don't mess with this bank account. And you do anyway. On or about October 10th through the 12th of 2018, Church Registrar Lindsay took Mr. Henderson's cell phone and said she was going to open new credit cards for him. She told him they would be 0% interest for the first year, which he initially thought would mean 0% payments. He thought that means no payments at all for a year, and he would have a year to make money and pay them off. He was confused, mistaken, and later felt as though he had been unfairly manipulated. Anyway, Lindsay opened the new credit cards by using the internet and the websites for each credit card company. Without Mr. Henderson's assistance, she inputted the required information into the online applications to open each new credit card. She did not tell him what information she was inputting into each credit card application. After Lindsay had completed each credit card application, she would have Mr. Henderson press the appropriate computer key to submit the credit card applications. When he asked her why, she responded, because it would be unethical for her to actually submit the application. It's okay for you to fill in everything, not have him fill in everything, but it's unethical for you to actually submit it. It's unethical that you have pressured this man into doing all this stuff to begin with. In this manner, Lindsay opened 7 credit cards, one after the other. Credit card applications were later declined by Discover and Citibank. It should be noted that on November 17, 2018, Citibank declined the credit applications prepared by the Church of Scientology because Citibank couldn't verify the accuracy of some of the information the church provided. However, the church was on notice of Mr. Henderson's meager income and his reliance upon the government food stamp program. Mr. Henderson was obviously unable to lawfully qualify for even the 7 credit cards the church was opening to enable him to purchase and pay for the church's very expensive products. Similarly, the church knew, or should have known, that once the church had maxed out each of the 8 credit cards, Mr. Henderson was obviously unable to service the aggregated minimum monthly payments of $4,441.48. His monthly income was approximately $500, which is supplemented by the government food stamp program. The church was clearly engaged in a fraud ab initio. They opened so many lines of credit for this man that even the minimum monthly payments for all the lines of credit that they opened, if you added all the minimum monthly payments together, would be $4,441.48. The man only made $500 a month. There's no way he was ever going to be able to keep up with that. No way. But it's unethical for her to submit one for him, that he had to press the correct button to submit it. But it's not unethical to open this many lines of credit. Notwithstanding the using of Mr. Henderson's own cell phone 3 to 4 hours later, Lindsay then telephoned each of the credit card companies. Each of her telephone calls would have been recorded by the credit card company. Lindsay told each credit card company's representative that she was just helping her boss or her brother with his finances, and she was calling to see if the credit card application had been approved. Upon being questioned, Lindsay would pass the cell phone to a confused Mr. Henderson to confirm that the information Lindsay had just given to the credit card company about her being his sister or employer was correct, and that he would hand the cell phone back to her so she could complete the call. That same day, the church maxed each of the credit cards out. The charges that totaled nearly $77,000. The 7 new credit cards had not even been printed or mailed. So you open them, then you're calling them. Are they approved? Are they approved? Are they approved? You're hounding these credit card companies just to see if they're approved yet. And as soon as they're approved, you max them out. So in one day, you're opening the lines, then you're maxing them out for a total of $77,000 in one day. Registrar Lindsay retained custody of each of the 7 new credit cards after they were issued and mailed. The church did not need to have Mr. Henderson's RCU card because they already had all requisite information in which to impersonate him and make unauthorized charges. Indeed, at one point in time, Mr. Henderson was present when a man came into the LA org and asked to see Lindsay. The receptionist said, "Who are you?" "I'm her husband, and she has all my credit cards." The man replied. Mr. Henderson interjected, "Well, she must be a bigamist because she has my credit cards too." Anyway, the church had Mr. Henderson do its 250 question Oxford capacity analysis, which the church has everybody do this 250 question personality test. And this is a very outdated test. It's not very accurate. There are better personality tests out there. But again, they don't like psychiatry, so they don't want to use the more up-to-date test. Anyway, while he was doing it, church employees repeatedly interrupted him to request to sign a check to be drawn on his RCU checking account. But the church was not using his own checks. They were creating and typing a special check but it took them at least 4 times to get the information on their check correct. They had obtained the checking account number, bank routing number, etc. from the RCU. Eventually, Mr. Henderson signed one check, which was made out to the LA org for $13,000, which almost emptied his RCU checking account. Later that day, Mr. Henderson could not understand why he had agreed to what the church's registrars wanted and why he eventually signed their checks. That night, he noticed that there was only $400 in his RCU checking account. He was distraught and broken down into tears over what the church had done to him, his finances, and his future. After the church had opened the 7 new credit cards for Mr. Henderson and then maxed them out with charges he had not authorized, and had maxed out his RCU credit card and had drained his RCU checking account of $13,000, Mr. Henderson realized the enormity of what had happened and the impossible financial position the church had now put him in. He concluded that the church must have fabricated his financial status when it used the internet to subsequently open his 7 new credit cards. He became concerned as to what had happened and could not understand how the church had pressured and manipulated him into getting involved again with the Scientology organization. It felt as though he was in a matrix, that he was in a tunnel. That night, after the 7 new credit cards had been opened and by the church, Mr. Henderson looked at his RCU credit card balance online and learned that the church had maxed that out too, and 2 more charges, one for $12,000 and another for $1,000. Mr. Henderson had no recollection of authorizing either one. On or about October 17th of 2019, Mr. Henderson complained to Registrar Lindsay about what had been done to his RCU credit card. He was told that they could fix that. Lindsay then drove him to the nearby ClearPath Credit Union location, gave him instructions, and waited outside while he carried the instructions into the bank, although he was confused as to what he was doing and why. He recalls that she had him do was cash advance the entire limits of the 2 First Tech cards to a ClearPath savings account she had previously opened in his name, and then withdraw the cashier's check in favor of the LA org for $30,000. Lindsay also told him that ClearPath and First Tech were related companies. As a result, Lindsay told Mr. Henderson they could now put a stop payment on the RCU check, which she did using his cell phone. However, he later called the RCU himself and learned that the stop payment was unsuccessful because the $13,000 had already been transferred from his RCU credit card to the church's account. So, they are pretty much just stealing more and more and more and more money from him. He does not understand what's going on, so Lindsay is just telling him things to do, and he thinks that he's doing the right thing, so he's listening to her. And she is just stealing more and more money. And this is stealing. She is stealing from him. Oh, well, go in here and do cash advances into this savings account that I opened in your name, that you didn't know I was opening in your name. And then you're going to pull all the money out into a cashier's check. And then I'm just going to stop payment on that one check and it's cool. No, it's not, because it's already been enough time that that check is already cleared and y'all have got that money. And now you've got this extra $30,000 that he just did cash advances for, so you have that money too. So you just stole more money from him. By October 16th or 17th, 2018, Mr. Henderson was not sleeping. He started freaking out about what Scientology had persuaded him to do. He wrote a few knowledge reports, or KRs, to RTC and the RTC computer. On the RTC computer. He also gave copies to his auditor and ethics officer. Although he understood that the church would pay for his accommodation and food, it had reneged on that, and he was virtually without funds. He began surviving on food stamps. Devastated, On October 17, 2018, Mr. Henderson called Hawaii and canceled the escrow in connection with the property he was planning to purchase before the church persuaded him that he would be better off going clear. Now he had no money, no property, and he was more than $80,000 in debt. Meanwhile, the church had delivered 31 boxes of books to Mr. Henderson. He had nowhere to put so many books, and for that sole purpose, he had to rent a storage room near the church. And here is a picture of the books that were delivered to Mr. Henderson. Now, you stole all this money from him, and all he has to show for it are all these boxes of books. About 5 days before he returned to Hawaii, Mr. Henderson requested Cassie to schedule his return trip. She could not do it then, but said she would do it so in several days. She never did. He had to set up his own return air ticket to Hawaii at his own expense. Meanwhile, the church was creating difficulties, delays, and more expenses for him. Every time he expressed his financial anxieties or complained as to what had happened, the church said he was nattering, and therefore he had to go back into sessions and undergo further auditing at his expense on many hundreds of dollars per hour. This church auditing took the form of expensive security checks on the church's e-meter. Many of the security checks questions asked about having sex with little girls and boys. He expressed his outrage and offense at their suggestions. The church responded that it was trying to determine if he was dangerous to the community. If this was not bad enough, there would be worse treatment to come. As noted earlier, Mr. Henderson had to unexpectedly arrange and pay for his return air ticket to Hawaii. However, the night before he was scheduled to return, the church required him to do even more security checking and punishing lower conditions. This required him to approach other Scientologists at the LA org and ask for their supporting signatures on a written request to rejoin the group. During 2 days of lower conditions, the ethics officer kept rewriting the conditions Mr. Henderson had to do to attest and have a floating needle. Then he had to write a success story. He had nothing successful to write about. Mr. Henderson protested because he had his return flight to catch, and he was at risk of missing the plane's departure from Los Angeles Airport. He was told, "You are not going anywhere. You are not leaving the building until you finish these steps." Now the church was detaining him against his will. As a result, he had to cancel his air ticket and reschedule at an additional personal cost of $150. The next day, Mr. Henderson was told, "You are not allowed to leave until you write a success story." He finally finished about 10 p.m. and just made the 10 p.m. church shuttle back to the Scientology Crest Hotel. The next morning, he went to the airport. On November 1st, 2018, Mr. Henderson arrived back in Hawaii, where he continued to be anxious and thought he might have to declare bankruptcy because of the nearly $80,000 indebtedness to the church had caused him to incur. Along with the removal of the $13,000 from his RCU checking account, the other cost he incurred, and the cost of the air ticket back home, which the church had said it would pay, with inexplicably persuading him to travel to Los Angeles org to go clear. After his return to Hawaii at the beginning of November 2018, Mr. Henderson began making telephone calls to the church. He wanted to request restitution for the expense it had convinced him to incur. In this regard, in 1993, the church had made numerous representations about its refund and repayment procedures to the IRS to support of its group application for IRS Section 501c3 status, which that's the tax-exempt status. They had to show that they were going to be able to give refunds to people that wanted refunds and all of that jazz. They had to give like a bunch of things supporting where they would be tax exempt. Like they had to give all of these detailed things, and one of those was a refund policy. However, this situation is different. It involves credit card fraud and other criminal conduct by the church and its agents. Mr. Henderson could not get through to the appropriate staff when he made these telephone calls to the church, and his messages to call back were never returned. For example, on November 11, 2018, he called ethics at the LA org 12 times in one day. Few of these telephone calls were returned. The few times he was able to speak with someone at the LA org about restitution, he was told that he would have to return to LA org and do a routing out form. Exasperated, on November 11, 2018, he wrote a knowledge report. The next day, November 12, 2018, the LA org finally returned his credit cards. Subsequently, on November 15th and 16th, 2018, Mr. Henderson started calling the 7 credit card companies and the 8th, the RCU credit card company, to provide information as to what the church had done to him and then to close each account. Each credit card company's representative stated that the call was being recorded. Several said that he may have to participate in credit card fraud, however, innocently and in unconspicuous circumstances that included the lack of consent, deceit, duress, mental manipulation, misrepresentations, and other fraud and misconduct. Apparently, in addition to credit card fraud, the church may have lied to the credit card companies, made false representations, and made other false pretenses. Obviously, this has been something that many people have talked about. He is not the only case that has come up in reference to this. There are other cases out there where they are talking about how they will sit around and 4 or 5 registrars will be around them, like calling different credit card companies and being online, typing into different credit card apps, and just sending all these credit card applications in at one time, trying to get several lines of credit open at one time. This is not the only case. There are several cases out there like this. American Express was cooperative. They seemed to understand what had happened. On November 15, 2018, they closed Mr. Henderson's new account, and on November 17, 2018, they credited the closed account with $1,000, subject to documented opposition by the merchant church. Similarly, on November 16, 2018, Wells Fargo closed his account, and on November 19, 2018, they credited his account $2,500. Mr. Henderson was charged. Mr. Henderson also changed passwords to his email account and RCU accounts. In addition, he called TransUnion and Equifax to put a security freeze on his credit. He was told he would need a subpoena to find out from LendingTree if there were other accounts he needed to close. He still does not know. Before the church had persuaded Mr. Henderson to travel to Los Angeles, he had a credit FICO score of 808. After the church had finished with the 8 credit cards and checking account, his FICO score had plummeted to 456. Now he will have to engage a credit repair firm to assist in recovery of his good FICO score. In early January 2019, Mr. Henderson still had not received any significant or satisfactory response from the church, and he decided to travel to Los Angeles and make his restitution claims personally. He did some internet research about the church, happened upon the adverse claims of other former Scientologists when they did the routing form procedure, and happened upon a contact information for several prominent former Scientologists. They referred Mr. Henderson to his attorney Harrian, who on January 9th, 2018, I think he meant 2019, emailed church attorney Kendrick L. Moxon Esquire to advise the church that this pre-litigation demand letter would be forthcoming. Television, internet, and other media then learned of Mr. Henderson's shocking story and financial plight. The TV, internet, and print media want to immediately tape and publish his story and his wish to seek legal redress and restitution. Notwithstanding, to date, Mr. Henderson's counsel has prevailed upon him and the media to first request pre-litigation relief by way of an out-of-court settlement. Graham Berry. So, this is a very detailed letter, but this is not the first story that I have heard, or anybody who follows Scientology has heard, of them just ruining someone's credit. I mean, just taking it and straight mopping the floor with it. I mean, people have lost their houses, their cars, I mean, land, money. I mean, it's horrific what they have done to people. But anyway, so that is going to be the end of this video. Let me know what you think. Give this video a thumbs up. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe. Ring that bell so that you get notified anytime I upload new content. Let me know what you think of this article down in the comment section down below. What do you think of these financial strings Scientology likes to pull? Do you believe that they need to be brought into court more on a legal status? I think they need to be brought up before some criminal courts, because what they are doing are more of a defrauding type situation. But anyway, guys, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. If you have an article that you want me to cover on Scientology, you can leave it on my Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or send it to me in an email. All of that is linked down below in the description box. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this video, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.